Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Gary A. Swaby, and you're now listening to the BookCast episode 12, I believe, and this is the end of year episode. On this episode, we're going to be talking our best and worst books of 2018. But before we get to that, there's a few things that we want to talk about first. We want to talk about what we're currently reading, but before we get to that, there was a show that launched on Netflix on Boxing Day, I believe, which is the day after Christmas, and that was You by Caroline Katniss. The TV show adaptation. So of course I'm here with Miss Dana Abercrombie. How you doing, Dana?
Hello, hello, hello. I'm doing wonderful.
Good, good. So you were the one who really got me into You the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got the TV show before we did here in the
Mm-hmm.
UK.
Months
Um,
before you guys.
yep. So you were telling me that you were kind of forcing me to watch this show as well, and
Yeah.
I ended up binging it and actually enjoying it. So let's talk about the show and how it compares to the book. Now I noticed they changed a lot of things, in the TV adaptation, the Netflix version. And I'm not sure how I feel about that because I don't know, like I'm really like would you would you call them, like I'm a book snob basically. Like I'm very wary of movie and TV adaptations, especially when they change a lot of the story elements of the book and stuff. So sometimes they improved it, but sometimes I didn't like what they changed. Like they added a whole storyline with Joe having a neighbor. And I think that was good because it showed more of the human side of Joe because he's kind of a sociopath. So that was good. But what did you think of the changes between the book and the TV show
I
without
had
without giving too much away?
without spoiling anything, I had the direct immediate reaction that was opposite of yours. I loved all of the changes because for me, it felt that you took Caroline Kepner's work and it made it better and it filled in a lot of those holes that was missing when you was reading the book. Is not perfect, and there's certain things that's like with the TV show you needed to add more in order to make a character more well-rounded. For Joe, and adding this next door neighbor and the family there, it made him into, you saw a more human side of him. Where instead of in the book, you get this guy who's very focused and on a mission, but you don't see what he's like, on his downtime, or is there any type of lightness to Joe? And by having this neighbor, you saw the compassionate parts with it. Something as simple as, here's my sandwich. That to me kind of got you more on his side. While I was reading you, I felt that I love the book, by the way, but I just felt that I wanted to know more about the character. And with this TV show, even though it's only 10 episodes in this limited space, they was able to just add more depth and make him a character where you found yourself struggling, to not root for. And I think that that's what makes for a good TV and just good characters. When you see someone who, he's kind of evil and he does what he does, but there are parts where you're like, well, but wait, he's not that bad because he did that. And look, he cares about that person. So for me, it just made the struggle of trying to hate Joe way harder. So I like what they did. I liked all the changes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. Joe was a lot more human. To me, it seemed like the show producers were like, okay, we really love this book, but there's a few elements that could be expanded upon, so we want to do that in the TV version. And for the most part, they did an okay job. There was just a few plot points here and there where I was like, okay, why did they change that? But yeah, for the for somebody who hasn't read the book and just sees that show, I can see how they would really enjoy it because it's definitely tailored more to the viewing experience rather than appealing to people who just read the book. So I guess that's good in a way. um I will say as well that the show made me like some characters more than I did in the book. And Peach Salinger is like the biggest one. Like I liked her a lot more in the show than in the book. In the book, I hated her. Um, but she the actress was really good and easy on the eyes. But yeah, even the character was more enjoyable to watch on the series. Do you agree?
I was Team Peach the whole way, and even though you knew what was gonna happen, and then they came with still Team Peach, and they definitely made you feel for her. I mean, it's a weird situation in which she this kind of like triangle that they end up in. But I found myself rooting for her. I'm like, at the end of the day, Peach was the one who always had her back, and so I was there for Peach. But in the book, you just don't. For me, I didn't get that kind of connection with Peach. I just felt that she was more of an annoyance
Hmm.
than someone who was fully involved and had this type of friendship and even deeper with Beck. So for me, I preferred the TV version way more, and then the acting was just so superb. I loved every part of it so much, and I loved her character so much.
Yeah. Um, as for Beck, I I wasn't like it didn't make me like her more. Like I think I disliked her as much as I did in the book because this is a book that has a lot of like dislikable characters, but me personally, I like that in a book sometimes if it's done well. Like the characters don't actually have to be likable, because sometimes I like to hate characters. So um, this book does that really well. And the show Beck just it wasn't a feeling like I liked to hate her. She was just annoying to me, I think. Um, and it put me more on the side of Joe in certain moments, which that's one of the appeals of the book is that Joe is the main character, but you're not you know that you're not supposed to agree with him or like what he's doing, but sometimes you can't help but empathize with him. And I think the show did that really good as well. Because there was certain times where I was like really like rooting for Joe, like during the show. I was like, okay, now everything's good. He's all happy now and everything, and I'm glad to see him happy. And I'm like, what am I thinking? Like, he's done a lot of bad things to get to this point. So I think that was carried really well in the show. Now the ending, they changed the ending, and we can't say what the ending is, of course. And I don't know how I feel about that, but
It's
I guess this
wonderful.
is this is Lifetime, setting up their version of season two, which seems like it's not going to be the same as what Hidden Bodies, the second book, is. Um, and I don't know how I feel about the plot twist at the end, but I mean, it was something I wasn't expecting. So for shock value, I give them a thumbs up for that. And I take it you agree, Dana.
No, I love the end. This is like the ending when I finally watched it because when you read the book, you're kind of like, oh, okay, this is what's gonna happen, and you're gonna go there next, and you're kind of like you think you know where season two is gonna go because she wrote a sequel about it. But then when I read it, I mean when I saw it, sorry, I was completely taken aback, and then I went and watched it again, looking directly for like a certain character and a certain part, and I realized that everything that they did kind of made sense if you was looking for that. And I thought it was very smart. I love that idea. And now it keeps you more wanting to know more because this person or the situation that happened, you need answers. And now for me, I wonder about so many other different things with other characters. But for me, this was like when I saw that ending, that was like when I started hitting you up repeatedly. You have to watch the show, and I'm like trying to search for it in the UK because you needed to watch the show just because of that ending. I wanted to see how you would react, and I was kind of disappointed that you didn't react the same way I did.
Well, I mean, I I show emotion differently, but I mean, I can't remember what I said to you, but I remember being a bit confused by it. Like I remember asking you like why,
Yeah, you was
why
like
this.
really upset. You was like, this doesn't make any sense, and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it does because thinking back, I can't remember any point where they point out this person not being around anymore.
The
So
whole time they pointing out the person. They're pointing out the whole thing from the first episode.
no, but
And they
I can't remember a point where this is hard to talk about without talking about spoilers, but I can't remember a point where they specifically said that that person is gone now. Um, maybe I missed it. Maybe I need to go back and watch. But so
there you go.
that's where it makes sense. Like thinking about it afterwards in retrospect. So like it looks like they put a lot of thought into that and a lot of planning into it. So that's good, I guess. But
See, I think you're missing the thing. The whole show, I think the theme is assumptions. Because Joe assumed a certain way about Beck. Beck assumed Joe was a certain way. Even Peach assumed Joe was going to be a certain way, and she assumed that Beck was going to be a certain way towards her. So the whole thing was just about assumptions. So in this character, we all assumed that one thing, but that changed along with a lot of other things that we assumed about the other characters. So for me, that is why I loved the plot twist.
yeah, fair enough. Well, I
You're
mean,
like, no.
I have to admit that I can't wait to see what they do in second season. So that's a good thing. They've already sold me on the next season. Um, so I mean, yeah, it was good overall. It was a decent watch. I personally still prefer the book, but I am a book snob. So there you go. But
I prefer the TV show because it's better than the book. And also, I still got to give Caroline Katniss her just due. She's an executive producer. So good for
yeah,
you. Like she knew what her problems were and she was able to fix it.
yep. Kudos to her. Um,
And also, you have to. There was also remember there were other plot twists and different characters that they changed. They changed also ethnicities.
oh yeah, yeah, that was a big shock too.
It was a big shock.
It was a pretty multicultural cast, somewhat. So yeah, I mean that was cool to see.
Mhm.
But yeah, go check out You if you're into your psychological thrillers, people. But
Which is on Netflix and not Night Lifetime because they transferred it over to Netflix.
yeah, so I mean this was produced by Lifetime, and now you can watch it on Netflix if you have Netflix. So
Yay! And season 2 will air on Netflix.
it's
Like
on
it's
Netflix
it,
first.
it no, it's on Netflix. Period. They changed it over because the viewership they wanted to improve upon the viewership, and with Netflix having a higher viewership, like everyone is going to Netflix now. For example, Bird Box, like they had 45 million views in 7 days, so they transferred it over to Netflix because it wants to be higher rated,
Yeah,
a larger audience.
because that's good because we don't have Lifetime over here. So you know.
And people don't associate this type of movie, this type of TV show with Lifetime. People still think Lifetime is like that either that really sappy type of drama or I hate you type of my husband's killing me movie of the week. So it's better on Netflix.
I have to say something funny. When one of my friends found out that this was a Lifetime movie, he laughed. He laughed at me. So
What?
yeah.
It's a Lifetime TV show. Don't knock Lifetime. They make great TV shows.
But yeah, definitely a good show. So moving on to actual books. So before we get into our best and worst that we read this year, um, let's get into what we're currently reading or the last book that you read in Dana's case. So I'll go first here since I am actually reading something currently. Um, So the book I'm reading is called Ream D by Neil Stevenson. Now, Ream D is it's a play on words. It's actually a misspelling of read me, and that's very relevant to the actual plot. So basically, the gist of this book is that there's this video game called T-Rain or Terrain. It's it's supposed to say it's supposed to be pronounced terrain, but it's spelled T hyphen rain. So it's like a really quirky kind of MMO world based on World of Warcraft. And basically the owner has designed this this MMO so that people can mine gold in the game world. So like you have a lot of people in China and other foreign territories mining gold in the game, and this gold I guess gets bought by players in the West or whatever, and then they use it to buy um, cosmetic items and gear in the game and things like that. So it's almost like real life, basically. Like stuff gets mined in other countries, and then people in the Western world take it. That's kind of what happens in the game. But you have uh, people making actual money from this in China. So what happens is they build this kind of virus called ReamD, um, which it's like a file that lies on your hard drive or on your thumb drive or something, and if you get it, then it holds any of your files that are on that drive for ransom. And to get your files back, you actually have to log into the game and carry you have to buy gold in the game, and you have to carry that gold to a certain point to transfer over. And what happens is they don't actually allow you to go to that point and hand over the money. They just rob you and kill you for it. And they keep doing this repeatedly to everyone until like they have tons of gold, basically. So what happens is one of the owners of the game, his niece is visiting him, and she brings her boyfriend. Her boyfriend is a hacker. He happens to be he set up a deal where he's bringing a bunch of credit card numbers to a third party contact, and this third party contact works for the Russian mafia. So the hacker brings the card numbers to the third party vendor, meets him in a bar, but the third party vendor doesn't have a CD drive on his laptop, so he needs a thumb drive. So he borrows a thumb drive from his girlfriend's uncle, and his girlfriend's uncle has the ReamD virus on his flash drive, which means that the credit card numbers get held for ransom when the third party guy buys it, and the Russian mafia are pissed off and they go to visit the hacker guy, and his girlfriend is there at the time, and they kidnap them basically, and they tell them all about the virus and everything, and then they have to hunt down the actual creators of the virus in China. So that's basically where I've got to at this point. Like they've just got to the point where they're in China hunting down the people who made the virus. So it's a very convoluted, very techie kind of plot, but I like that. It's different. I will say this is a long book though, like it's 1,000 pages long. And I'm like 300, I'm just over 300 pages in, and I'm wondering how much further they can go in the story at this point. Um, Now, a lot of the reviews I've read say that it's a good book, it's a good read, and everything. But there's a few that say it needed to be edited down a little bit, like it could have been shorter. So I'm wondering if it's going to lose steam at any point and become boring to me, because this is 1,000 pages long, and I'm not even 50% yet. Like I'm like 31% or something. Um, so yeah, this is like one of the longest books I've read in a long time, but it's decent. It's interesting. So I'm gonna stick with it until I feel bored. If I feel bored at any point, I might consider like not finishing and moving on to something else because it's a very long book. But so far, it's very interesting, and I like Neil Stevenson's ideas and concepts. So I'm gonna stick with it for now. But how about you, Dana? What was the last book you read? And you're muted.
I am muted. I had a whole thing and everything. The last book that I read is called The Ex's Revenge. It is about it's by Joe Jakeman. It's about this woman, right? She is trying to get a divorce from her husband. He's making it very difficult. They share a child. And the thing is that he's also very abusive, verbally, mentally, psychologically, physically, very abusive. And she's just someone who just wants a divorce. The thing is that she also has to kind of deal with his now girlfriend who is much younger than her. And there's also another woman who's always had a connection to the husband that just never seems to go away. During one day they're trying to get work out the divorce papers, he comes over, and it starts off much very simple, and they end up in this huge argument in a huge fight, and through the fight he ends up in the cellar of their house. Like you fight someone and you push them down the stairs, not trying to like that was your goal, but that you just ends up that happens that way because of the fight. And she locks him in the cellar, and she decides that she's going to take out her revenge on him. And it's how this woman and the other two women end up being involved with the kind of the revenge plot of everything that's going on, and has this wonderful backstory about why he is abusive in the way that he is. And it doesn't exactly give any type of excuses as to, because he came from a broken home, it's okay that he beats women. They're just stating everything as fact. The book is very fun. Like, it's literally one of those, I hate the term page turner, but it's the only word that can fit, because it's one of those books that you just keep reading and you keep reading and you keep reading to the point where you can easily finish it in one day. It's only around like 300 and maybe 310 pages. So it's rather short and it goes by very quickly. And it's just one of those really fun, entertaining type of books that's not exactly is going to make you, start thinking or doing anything differently, or really start questioning and having these deep conversations. But it's just something that was just really, really fun, and something that I was really happy that I finished literally on the last day of 2018, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. By the time that you got to the end, it was a little bit silly. It was a little bit silly, but still, in its silliness, it still worked. And it had great action in it. There's great sequences. I mean, he is one of those guys who's very brutal. He is physically fighting women. He's fighting everyone, basically. And all of the characters just seem to have their purpose and their point. It gets a little bit too, like, cheesy at the very, very end, like literally the last page. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would recommend it if you want something that's light, that's really quick to go, but that to read, and it's gonna just be fun. And you're okay to accept like silliness. So I loved it.
Interesting.
That's
But
like the last book I read, and then I finally decided that I was gonna read 5 Feet Apart. At literally the last second.
well, did you finish that already?
What, 5 feet apart? No, literally the last second today.
Oh,
I didn't finish it.
oh, okay.
Yes, I read 8 books in a day. No,
Oh, okay. So are you gonna wait until the new year to start that, or are you gonna start it like
I can
before?
just start it now because, unlike other people, the new year doesn't really mean anything to me. Like, I know a lot of people are out there celebrating already. I don't know if you had your new year yet because you're in the UK or you're close.
It's a few hours away now.
Okay, it's a few hours away, and there's like a lot
Well,
more
two and a half.
hours.
It's 2.5
Oh,
hours away.
oh, okay. See, it's like around 8 hours for me. And I'm just someone who really just I've never cared about New Year's, so I'll just finish my book and live my best life reading.
Fair enough. Okay, so yeah, that's what we've currently been reading. So
Yay!
let's get to the meat and potatoes of today's
Meats,
show.
potatoes, or as you guys say, mashed peas. I learned about mashed peas. It's a book from the UK, so I'm learning a lot about the UK terminology and the foods that you guys eat. like
Yeah,
mashed
I
peas.
actually don't like mushy peas at all.
Mushy. What? Like that was the most fascinating thing because you have this guy in the book who's so dark and he's so violent, and then he's like, "Bring me my mushy peas," and I just couldn't. I could not stop laughing. It sounds like baby food.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Mushy
But
peas, which is just it's just mashed peas, right?
yeah.
That's crazy. That's hilarious. Is it supposed to take the place of like guacamole
Well, yeah, I guess so, because a lot of people here can't really take spice or anything
or
spicy.
flavor
So
or flavor in general?
true.
Mushy peas is about as exotic as it gets.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, so we're gonna have some fun and do our worst books of 2018 first. Now, before we get to this, let me preface this with a little disclaimer. Now, I am not the type of reader that reads newly released books. Um, just because I have such a huge backlog and I have tons of like books from previous years that I want to read. So I don't keep up with new releases, a lot of the time. And I don't tend to read stuff as they come out. I think I did that with one book this year. Um, so yeah, we're not doing it the best books that came out this year and the worst books that came out this year. We're just doing the best and the worst books that we actually read this year. So some of this stuff came out in years prior, or maybe even years and years ago, like a decade ago or something. So yeah, just wanted everyone to know that. But there is some new stuff in here also. So uh, as for worst books of 2018, Dana actually has five of them. I said, five maximum for each category. I only have one book one worst book that I read in 2018. Because I have to say, 2018 was my best reading year ever. Like, I feel like I read some pretty amazing books this year. So, there was a lot of stuff I enjoyed. But one book stood out, and I'll go ahead, and do it since I just have one book to talk about. So the worst book of 2018 that I read is A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. Now, I the the Akotar series, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses, that series, it was a pretty decent fantasy series. It's about a female human, and she becomes a fairy after she's kind of abducted and taken to another world and everything. It's sort of the first book is sort of like a Beauty and the Beast kind of story, if you will. It's like a retelling. Um, and then the second book really expands on things and makes things a lot more grander in the story. That's A Court of Mist and Fury. Now that's definitely the best book of the series. And then the final book was A Court of War and Ruin, which it was average, like it was okay, it wasn't great. So there's a lot of people who feel differently about Sarah J. Maas's series. Like some people hate them, some people like them.
Hate
Um,
them.
yeah, but this book in particular, I was kind of looking forward to it because I wanted to see what would happen with these characters after the final book in that series. And this book, A Court of Frost and Starlight, was basically a novella that's going to bridge the gap between the Akotar series and the next series set in that same universe. And I have to say that this was a terrible novella. Like it was, I really like don't know what she was thinking. Like nothing happens in the book at all. So basically, they have what do they call it? It's like a celebration. It's like the fantasy equivalent of Christmas, basically. Um, and a lot of this book is really just like the main female and the male that end up together in the story. It's basically just them wondering what they're going to buy their friends for Christmas, and throughout the whole book, they're thinking of different ways that they want to get it on with each other. And it's pervy to the point that there's scenes where they're in rooms with their family and friends, and all they can think about is boning each other. Like it's it's just creepy, especially when you consider this is like it's supposed to be new adult, but really it's promoted towards the young adult crowd. Um and yeah, it just comes off as like really weird and creepy and overly sexual. Um and to be honest, it reads like fanfic, like seriously. And yeah, it was just really juvenile, and I just hated it. Like it was atrocious, to be honest. And it's annoying because Sarah J. Maas, like she has a lot of potential as a writer. Whenever she does like world building and things like that, I feel like she's onto something, but instead she tries to focus on, these sexual storylines, and
She lacks
that's
focus.
yeah, exactly. And that's where it's like, who are these books really for? Because what I loved about the series was the world building and the fantasy elements and the magic systems. But now you're telling me that you're focusing more on the young girl market by filling it with porn and like sexual stuff. And yeah, it's just not for me. So yeah, really disappointed by that. And that's the only worst book I have of 2018. So, Dana, how about you get to your long list of worst books?
It's it's a short list out of protest, just so you know, under duress, so you know. Um, yeah, but no, I'm shocked. Sarah J. Maas is not on my list, even though honorable mention does go to her Catwoman Seeker, Soul Searcher book for just being god awful, but it's not the worst. Okay, so my top five, in no particular order, by the way, well, maybe in like some order, but either way, here we go. First off, I have to start off that I was so excited to start the year reading this book. I've waited forever to read it, and that would have to be Ibai Zobi. I cannot pronounce your name. It's Ibizoboi, but it's Pride. It is the retelling of Pride told through these African American characters that take place in Brooklyn. And it's a retelling, and it's modern, up to date. There's a lot of things that going on that's right there and current. So I was like, this is gonna be amazing. I cannot wait for this book. I literally almost fought a person at BookCon to get this book. I got the book. And it ended up being one of the worst books I have ever read. I would have to say, not even in this year, but probably in the last 2 years. One of the worst. It starts off with this family of sisters, and they live in the brownstone in Brooklyn that's slowly gentrifying. And they see that there's a new neighbor that's coming in, and it was in a building that was originally was torn down. No one took care of it. It was neglected, and then all of a sudden, through the gentrification process, people started, you got to start having the buildings up to date. They expanded. It looks really nice. It looked like it was made for people with a lot of money. So in comes this new family who are basically millionaires, and they decide, this is going to be their home. Now the thing is that this family, which is also African American, and the other family, which I said before was African American, they mix with Hispanic as well. um, they are considered kind of like, the Oreos, which are, black people who were kind of raised in such a white environment that they don't really know a lot of the black terminology and how it goes down in the parts of Brooklyn that are mainly black. It has a different type of communication that's there. So the oldest girl ends up checking out everything and talking to the family, and kind of maybe sort of likes the guy, the oldest son, and they have no chemistry at all. They just seem to not hit it off, but he's very visually pleasing to the eye. Meanwhile, she has another friend who is a guy who really likes her and wants to take her out. But she doesn't really seem to know what to do. She's kind of lost. She knows she just wants to go to college and move out of her neighborhood, but she doesn't want to lose her neighborhood. Like, for example, she doesn't want the neighborhood to change. And through this gentrification thing, she feels really torn about that as well. And she's afraid that when she goes off to college, she's going to come back to a neighborhood that's no longer her own. So she really feels her ties to Brooklyn and the black community, of which left of the black community, the black and Hispanic community, those who have not been pushed out yet. And she's slowly seeing that people are being pushed out. That, to me in itself, sounds like a very interesting read. It was something that really sparked my interest. The problem is that it is so terribly written that it is the most painful thing from literally the first page. I just kind of knew that this was as good as it's gonna get. Like literally, the first line was just as good as it's gonna get throughout the whole book. The sisters are very annoying. The None of them seems to be supportive or stand out. The girl who is very worldly in the sense that she loves the library. She loves learning about new things, about different cultures and about different countries. She's very ignorant to someone else's cultures, that being the boys who, even though they are black, they was raised in kind of like a Caucasian society, but she's just very ignorant about why someone would want to say move out of Brooklyn, or why they would want to go to a college, say like Yale, for example. She views that as, oh, you're trying to deny your blackness. And yet this is a girl who is very well educated and well read, and I was kind of confused by that. Also, the two main characters that are essentially supposed to get together at the end, because we all know Pride and Prejudice, the retelling of Pride and Prejudice, there's no chemistry at all with any of the characters. And I was very fascinated by that, because as a writer, you have control of writing chemistry. So I didn't know if this was something, I was so confused. I didn't know if this was the author's downfall, just in general. She can't write characters that have chemistry with each other. But I had zero interest in any of the relationships, just solely of how poorly written it was. It was one of those books that was just downright painful, and I did not understand why it existed. So for me, that's like one of the worst books I've ever read. But it's not the worst. I would say that that's the second worst. I'm going in a weird order because I finally realized as I talk more which book is actually, sucks more and sucks less. One of the other books that I read was A Simple Favor, which is by Darcy Bell. It is starts it's like a psychological thriller that ends up into just garbage. It's about this woman who is very nice, very friendly, and she ends up befriending one of the moms at the school, because they're boys, they both have boys, they're friends with each other, and they have to, hey, can we hang out, and they want to have play dates. And as a result, the two moms, the other mom, who is very high maintenance, high strung, very proper, kind of a little bit arrogant, they end up hanging out and forming a friendship. The girl, who is more of like a homebody, considers the other woman to be her best friend, even though you don't see that of the other woman put that label onto the other woman. All of a sudden, friendship, the girl, the woman who is the high maintenance one, asks, "Can you just watch my son? I have to work really late. Can you just watch him overnight?" Meanwhile, the husband is away overseas on business. So what ends up being one night ends up being another night and another night, and there's several nights, and she realizes that her friend is missing, and she thinks that someone has maybe hurt, kidnapped, did something to her friend. So she, who is a mommy vlogger, reaches out to the community and tries to find her friend. Meanwhile, there are several plots that are happening within the book. That you ever read something that's like plot after plot after plot after twist, and while it's supposed to be shocking, it just becomes very exhausting. So after a while, it just became very laughable. There was a lot of weird incest that just didn't need to happen that goes on in the book. There is couples and people hooking up that normally you just don't understand why. And then you finally realize what happened to the woman. And then there's another plot behind that involves us the twin and random parents and a fire and insurance money. And it's just something that is so over the top and so unnecessary that after a while it just becomes very painful to read. And it was just one of those books that I just kept getting more frustrated the more I read, to the point where I was almost going to just set it on fire, because that's how angry I was. I was reading the book while I was cooking, and I was like, if I drop it in these flames, no one will know, and I don't ever have to read this again.
What's the name of this book again?
A Simple Favor,
Okay.
which they turned into a movie, which shockingly was much better than the book. So it was terrible. Another book that I read that was downright disrespectful was called Tyler Johnson Was Here. It's by J. Coles. And it started out, the premise behind it was so beautiful.
J.
Now, this
Cole?
is J, no, not the singer, another
Okay.
random African American male writer.
Okay.
Um, this book was kind of, you know how you had The Hate You Give, and so it becomes very popular, and so the booksellers or publish house companies are like looking for books that's similar like that, so it can have the same type of impact. So you get a lot of these books about police brutality and death. And so this was one of the books that was released. The cover itself was downright so beautiful that I had to read this book. It was about a set of twins, they're boys, growing up kind of like in a hoodish area. And one night, one of the twins is murdered by the cops. He gets into an argument. He's murdered by the police. He's shot. He's killed. And it is sold as a book that is about grieving. And it is sold as a book about what does someone do when they lose their twin, someone that's always there. They're identical twins. What does that do to a person to lose them, and how it tears also the family apart as well. And while, the mom has one son that's alive, she still has another one who's not there. And to look at the boy, her son, who is there, and always constantly be reminded that her other son is dead, because they're twins. They look alike. They show very easily, even though they look alike, their personalities are very different. So that right there was something that was one of the most captivating things that I ever read. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to read this book just by knowing what the plot is. The problem with this book is it is literally word by set, by frame, by moment, a direct copy of The Hate You Give, even down to the point of Tupac is in every page. And I don't know about what's really going on in today's generation and the teenagers today, but I don't really think that they're listening to Tupac, gotta keep your head up every 5 seconds to help them through the day. And it was just one of those books that I lost complete respect for the author, solely based on how unoriginal it was. When I understand the themes may be similar, but when you got character by character, then you have a storyline that's trying, because it's YA. You have this weird romance storyline that's going on, where again, none of the characters have any chemistry at all. And then you have this, this, instead of what The Hate You Give did, when they showed kind of both sides of what it's like to be a police officer. Because remember, there was an uncle who was a cop that talked to Star and let him know his point of view. And then you have what it's like to be a black man in America and a black boy in America. This one was so racist towards white people, where instead of viewing this is a cop who is a bad cop and shot my brother, and he just so happened to be white, but this is just a bad man who is a bad cop. Page by page, it was white people are pigs. White people are disgusting. White people just want to go out in this world and shoot us. There was no argument to the other side. There was no look at the person. and not view a whole culture of people as being, racist because this happened to you. So it was
So it didn't show the whole picture.
no, it was literally a direct copy of Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give with I hate black people. I hate white people.
So he was just trying to cash in on the hate you
He
give
was
hype.
literally trying to cash in on the hate you give type of thing. That whole phenomenon with the hate you give, he was literally just cashing in. Like, you know how you just write something and it may be like, I finished the book in a day. I'm gonna go sell it now because it seems to be really popular and I'm gonna get
Yeah,
my movie deal. He didn't get no movie deal. Well, it's like it was that bad. It was that disrespectful.
yeah.
It was terrible. Um, so yeah, so that was bad. Last book, because you said five, um, has to go to. I struggled a lot with this. Actually, I'm on number four, so I still have room for a fifth book. The Hidden Bodies is the fourth book that I have to say is downright horrible. Um, those who would talk about you later, probably not, but we talked about the TV show and we talked about you before I talked about the book. It is a sequel to You, and this time it has the character Joe now moving to LA, and essentially his the past is trying to catch up to him and haunt him. The thing is that everything that I loved about You, the kind of the first person narrative, the right there you feel like you're in Joe's shoes, the stalking element, the whole mystery vibe thriller is dead, gone, buried, burned, and never to be seen again. Instead, we just get a story that is unnecessarily stretched out, filled with characters I don't care about. Joe, his personality, where he had kind of like you felt like Joe was a man who was on a mission and also had kind of like certain rules to himself. He just takes all caution to the wind. He doesn't care about anything anymore. He's all of a sudden this free spirit, weird LA transplant, and nothing makes any sense anymore. Everything that I loved about the personality and the character from You is gone, and it becomes this unnecessary overhyped Hollywood type of junk. Every page you just read, it's some celebrity name dropping, and we're doing coke, and let's go have an orgy, and random things that just don't make any sense. I've never seen Joe so horny in this book ever, and as a result it's terrible and it suffers and it's painful, and it's just I know that there's this third book that's coming out and I don't want to read it at all just because of how bad the second book is.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, judging by the fact that she kind of changed certain things in the TV
well, the
adaptation,
TV, yeah, the
I think
TV is not, yeah.
I think she's aware where she went wrong, and she'll probably try and make the third one a lot better. Me personally, I read Hidden Bodies too, and it's not one of the worst books I read, simply because um I recognize that it's not as good as You, but at the same time, I just kind of saw it as how like you have fast food fiction, like books
Mhm.
that they aren't like masterpieces, or they aren't amazing literary works, but you're entertained by them somewhat. Like that's what I saw Hidden Bodies as. Like, I quickly recognized that it wasn't going to be as good as You, and then I just thought, okay, I'm just gonna keep reading it and just enjoy that it's Joe, because I still enjoyed Joe's thoughts in the book, like how he viewed people in LA and stuff, like and how he made fun of people in his head. Like I really liked that. And I think Caroline Katniss does a really good job of that. And that was very strong in this book, like him, being snappy and thinking about people and things like that. So I enjoyed that part. Now the plot and the story was really
Mhm.
random. It was really random, like, to be honest. Like, and yeah, I see your point. It was like he was doing things he would never do in the first book. So yeah, that was really random. But I'm interested in seeing where she goes with the third book. But I understand why you have it as your worst.
My thing is that you have a sucky book. That's fine. But this is a sequel, and it felt like you're self sabotaging yourself by taking everything that was praised about the first book. I mean, even if you look, Stephen King is like going crazy over the first book. And all the elements that you had from the first book, even if you take it to another location, I don't care if this is taking place in a volcano, you still should carry some of those elements that is just amazing to the point where there's really no explanation. Like he loses focus as to what his mission is. And he just
Yeah,
kind of becomes involved in these unnecessary characters for the sake of involvement.
yeah, and I agree, and I think losing the like not being at the bookshop is a big part of that because the bookshop is an essential part of Joe's character as well, and that because he moved, that completely was missing, and I think that's what Stephen King liked because there was a lot of literary references in that book as well. A lot of them were about Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, like that element was completely lost also, as well as certain other things. So yeah, I think it was a bad move to kind of shift him to a new location and then especially that location and then have him indulge in like Hollywood and all these different things. Like
He
we
became a
don't
groupie. He was literally a groupie hoe.
yeah, yeah. So
And that's not Joe. That is literally everything that he despised in the first book. Because remember, Peach, he considered her to be a groupie. He considered all of her Beck's friends to be groupies, and he hated that. And then all of a sudden he goes to LA and like, I'm gonna be a groupie. And he ends up with that guy, going to that guy's house who's like a big time comedian celebrity. Like I would say like equivalent to a Dane Cook.
the TV show host or whatever.
Yeah, the TV show host comedian who's telling weird jokes.
Yeah.
I did not understand why she would do that. Like it just didn't make any sense to me. And so for me, you lost me, and it was every page became more painful. Like with you, I flew through you. With hidden bodies, it felt like it was a chore. Like, am I being punished? So yeah, I couldn't stand it. Um, so my last fifth book of terribleness, even though I struggled with this and I decided not to choose Sarah J. Mass's Catwoman because you already talked about Sarah J. Mass and her writing. Mine would has to go to. I'm struggling between this, but it has honorable mention goes to Black Panther: Young Prince for just being garbage, but nobody read it. Tell Me Lies. Tell Me Lies is by Caroline Loverling, and it is about. It started off again. All of these books started off really good. It started off with the premise of, you had a cycle of an abusive relationship where you're with this guy and you know you're going to leave him and he treats you like trash, but somehow you still love him, but you're going to leave him, but he still treats you like trash, and that endless cycle. That's exactly how the book was, to the point where there was no plot. It's about this girl who ended up with this guy who was very narcissistic, slept around, big ego. He didn't care about anyone's feelings. Like after he slept with them, so he just viewed women as a conquest. So he would spend all his time and attention trying to get with you, but the second that he got you, he just threw you aside and moved on to the next one. But you still hold on to him, and it was something about him that she had to be a part of. The thing is that they break up, they fall back in love again, but not even like I love you, baby. I love you too. It's she's always chasing him constantly, and there's no plot. There's nothing that happens. There's no other situation, and it just becomes very repetitive, and it goes nowhere very quickly, and you just get stuck in this mind of I love him, but I don't know what to do. So it's like you ever have that friend who you give advice to and they never seem to take it, and you slowly watch them turn into a mess, and you keep giving them advice hoping that they change, and they never do. But after a while you realize that you have to walk away from that person because they never will change. So you have to walk away from your friend who keeps
Mm-hmm.
asking you what you should do even though you keep giving them the same advice. That's what this book was. And as a reader, I felt that in order for me to live my best life, I had to walk away from that friend who kept living in the same cycle of abuse. So I could not complete this book because of just how awful it was. But I did ended up wanting to know what happened, so I picked it up again, and it was just nothing happened. It was literally a book of nothingness.
I just want to say that was a very vivid metaphor. Like that sounds like something you really went through. Like,
And I tried to have sympathy with the character because of like I've been there, so I know what it's like. But after a while, man, like it's just painful. You got to just walk
mhm.
away. Yeah, so that's my five. I did struggle with this when it came to order wise, but if I was to place this in order, because I know that you like your orders and you only had one, so I just have to put my order in, and it would have to be Tell Me Lies is number one, as it going from worst to least worst. Tell Me Lies is number one. Um, Tyler Johnson Was Here is number two. Pride is number three. A Simple Favor is number four, and Hidden Bodies is number five.
Okay, that's interesting. That's cool.
And
That's
I'm sure in like 5 seconds later, I'll change the order in my head. But that's the order that I'm
yeah.
sticking with for
Try
now.
not to think about it anymore. Otherwise, you'll be
Yes,
changing.
the year's over with. I don't have to see these books again.
Awesome. So let's get to the best books that we read in 2018. The good part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um. So all positive vibes from here on. Uh,
Positive.
indeed. So yeah, I'll go first. And since you ranked your worst, I'm going to go with my rank for best. So I'm going to start with number five and then go down to number one. Um, so my number five book that I read in 2018 is The Kind Worth Killing. This was one that you recommended to me.
Mm-hmm,
It's another psychological thriller
mm-hmm.
with a strong mystery element as well. Now I don't remember any of the character names because I'm bad with names, but basically what happens in this, to quickly summarize it, a guy is having problems in his marriage. He finds out that his wife has been cheating on him with the building guy who's like making a house for them,
The
basically.
constructor.
Yeah, the constructor.
He's cheating with the constructor. He's pounding those cabinets in.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, and he's on a flight on business, and he meets this random woman. He tells her about his problems, and she suggests that he should kill his wife. She says it jokingly at first, but then they start talking about it seriously. And then you go into the book gives you a background on who the woman is, like the perspective changes a lot. And you get to know what her background is and that she's killed before. And then it shows them going through with the plot and the plans to kill his wife. And then there's a huge plot twist around the midpoint of the book, and then things get very juicy from then on. So yeah, this was a very good psychological thriller, and I really loved the ending as well. Like it was a very smart ending, I think. So yeah, that's my number five book of the year. My number four book is You by Caroline Katniss. We've talked a lot about You. We spoke about it on the last show and possibly the one before that. Um, and yeah, this is another psychological thriller. It's about a guy called Joe who works in a bookshop. A girl called Guinevere Beck walks in and he falls in love with her instantly. He stalks her, follows her, and he manipulates the situation until he becomes her boyfriend, pretty much. And there's a lot of killing and violence involved. And yeah, it's a really interesting book to read. So that made number 4 on my list. Number 3 is Men Without Women Stories by Haruki Murakami. This is a bunch of short stories set in Japan, Tokyo, um, and it focuses on different relationships between men and women, and a lot of them are broken relationships or people outside of the relationship that are looking at it from a distance and seeing things or getting involved. It involves a lot of fidelity, I'll just say that. And this actually made me not want to get married because it seems like it's a lot of headache. But yeah, this
Wait, that was the book that said you didn't want to get married, not the kind worth killing? That was the book that did you win?
yeah, I mean, because kind worth killing is like I mean, it's not every day that people end up killing each other in marriage. I mean,
Yeah, that's we
usually
have
they
a whole
just,
channel in America dedicated to that.
what is that, Lifetime?
Ha ha ha! No, ha ha! Investigation ID.
Oh, okay, never heard of it. But yeah, Men Without Women Stories was good because not only is it about relationships, but it also gives you a lot of the mentality and a lot of the culture of Tokyo, and the ways people think there, and just you just feel very cultural, like like you're stepping into that world as you read it. And I really like Murakami's writing style. I also read another book from him. I didn't make this list though, but it was a really powerful book. I like how he doesn't give you the whole picture. Like a lot of his stories are ambiguous and they let you kind of fill in the blanks and take from it whatever you want to take from it. So that's what I really like about his writing. Um, and this book really just kind of stuck with me. Like it stayed on my mind throughout the year after I read it. So that's my number 3. My number 2 is The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, by Stieg Larsson. And I also read The Girl Who Played with Fire this year as well, but I think I enjoyed Hornet's Nest way more. Now this is a long book. I believe it might almost be 1,000 pages. I'm not quite sure on the page count. I read the Kindle version, but it's a long book, and I was never bored. Like I was interested like throughout the whole thing. Like every page was interesting. Um, so yeah, and it's hard to talk about it without giving away spoilers for people who haven't read this series. But I really liked the journey that the main characters took. I even enjoyed that there was like a little subplot in there as well, even though the outcome was a bit questionable. But just the fact that there was like this little sub mystery plot in there as well around the main story, it was pretty good. Like, because I don't often see stuff like that. It was like when you're playing a game and you do side missions. It was almost like that in a book, but it was it was well done, except for the ending of it. Um, and I think the actual ending of the plot, like of the main story, was handled really well. It wrapped things up and it lets you decide whether you want to continue, because the next book is a new author. But if you wanted to just end at this book, you really could, because it wraps up neatly. Um, so yeah, definitely. This was almost the best book I read this year. I think, like, just because I'm really into spies and espionage and conspiracies, and this gave me that fix. So um, yeah, this was a really good book in my opinion. It's a shame that the author died, because I would have liked to have seen what he did with the characters next. especially since he had like 10 books planned with these characters. But yeah, really good book, and I recommend everyone read this series. I know you didn't particularly enjoy Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Dana.
I struggle with the whole series because it's so boring. For me, it's just boring. I've struggled. I'm more interested in learning of reading the latest one that's not by the original author. Just because I love enjoyed the movie so much, I want to know if it translates well. I think that was the girl in the spider's web.
Yeah, Girl in the Spider's Web. I think there's been another book since that one as
That's
well, but
okay.
but
I just really enjoyed the movie, so I would read that like slowly one day, eventually. It's just the whole series just it doesn't do anything for me, but I'm happy you like it.
yeah, what I've heard is that people who weren't big fans of the original series liked the new writer more, like his style more, and people who loved Stieg Larsson's ones don't enjoy the new author as much. So
Haha, so I like it basically.
yeah, so maybe you'll enjoy the new author.
Oh
So
goody, goody.
so yeah, that's my number two. And my number one, I'm sure Dana already knows what this is. It's The Vegetarian by Han Kang.
That's a great book.
Yeah, like yeah, this was I believe this was like the first book I read this year, and all year I've like thought about this book, like, and how great it was that first time reading it. Like, since then I've gone back to like revisit certain passages and stuff. I haven't read it in full again yet, for a second time, but I've gone back to revisit certain chapters and just different passages because there's a lot of depth in there. And yeah, it was just an amazing story. Like it's a simple plot. Like it's about a girl who's going through. She has mental health issues, and she just decides to become vegetarian after having a bad dream. And the book is split into three parts. The first part is basically her husband. It's from his perspective, and it just deals with how his reaction and his response to her suddenly turning vegetarian, and the fact that she's kind of acting really weirdly all of a sudden. And the second part of the book is from her brother-in-law's point of view, and we see how he kind of manipulates her, as her mental health kind of it kind of goes downhill further. And then the third part of the book is, from her sister's point of view. And this is when she's kind of in crisis. And yeah, like there's a lot of this is another very ambiguous kind of book. There's like I've looked up online, there's a lot of people who discuss about the ending of the book and a lot of hidden meanings in the book and stuff. Like it's one of those books you can really discuss with people and find different meanings about. But one thing it does really well is it shows the thinking, the mentality of people in South Korea and their attitudes towards vegetarians. I guess eating meat is a big part of tradition there, and they don't understand vegetarianism. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of shocking scenes and impactful scenes in the book as well. So yeah, uh, Vegetarian is my best book that I read this year, hands down. Now, I will say one thing. I've been reading also what's it called? Human Acts by Han Kang, the same author. And I don't feel the same way about that book as I do Vegetarian, but I understand what she's going for in Human Acts because it's to do with a real life event that happened in South Korea. It was like an uprising, and yeah, it's like a very gruesome and grotesque kind of book that deals with the impact from that uprising, which was basically a bunch of cops and military people killing students and stuff who were protesting. Um, so yes, it basically deals with that subject matter and how it affects people. It just felt like a very personal story to her that she wanted to write for herself and not so much something that she wanted to become a bestseller. Um, but yeah, it's okay. It gives you some insight into the event. So yeah, but Vegetarian was great. Like yeah, hands down one of the best books I've ever read. So so let
I just want to say that even though it is not there's the theme of the meat. The thing is that it's not about meat at all. That what it's about is about what happens when a woman in the society tries to take control of her life and what she wants to do. And even something as small as I'm no longer eating meat, and how society and its norms will go against that to try to destroy a person solely based on them wanting to take control of their life. Women trying to just take control of something simple. Boom.
yeah. Yeah, and see, like that's what I mean. Like, there's so much meaning and depth in the book. Like, there's just so many hidden messages, and like there's a lot in there, and it's not that long a book either. So, like, everyone should kind of read it. Like, it's just good. Like, it's really good writing, in my opinion. And it's like I know it was translated by Deborah Smith, but it's like no word is wasted in this book. Like every word means something. Like every word is there. It's like well considered and well thought out kind of thing. Like they did a really good job with the translation. So yeah, love it. But let's get to the best books that you read in 2018. Now, are you ranking yours? You're muted.
I'm muted. No, because I am not willing to tear myself to pieces for a rank. That's just cruel and mean, and I cannot do that to myself. Some of the books, though, overlap with yours just a wee bit, a tiny bit. First, in no particular order, by the way. And by the way, I'm only the reason why it's not particular order because there's three that I'm actually struggling with, so I cannot rank them. But I'm just saying in no particular order. Here we go. As you said originally, the first one, Conworth Killing by Peter Swanson. That was one of the books that I could not stop reading. I could not put down. It was just something that was character after character, and there was so many layers that even though there was so many different things that was going on, everything still made sense. It tied up in a very nice bow, and it terrified me. It terrified me of people. Like I was literally afraid of just people to the point where I thought that this was one of the best psychological thrillers that I've ever read because you don't see certain things coming at all. There's a lot of different characters and who they really are. There's also people who are not who they say they are. That I think in other authors' hands, you would kind of lose that type of impact, and everything would just become convoluted and a hot mess, kind of similar to how A Simple Favor was. But with this and with Peter Swanson's hands, it just became something that was you felt the tension in each and every page, and you just wanted to learn more, but you was also afraid to know more because it would just destroy what you originally thought you knew. So for me, that is definitely on the list. Um, the Perfect Nanny by Eleni Salami. I cannot pronounce that name. I apologize. It's about this nanny who it starts off at the very beginning. It's not a spoiler because it's in the synopsis. She kills the two children that she is I guess nannying. Nannying, I found out is a real word. So that she is nannying. She's the nanny of these two small kids, by the way, and she kills them. And so the story goes backwards, not necessarily to answer why, but to give you a perspective as to what happened that led to this event. What ends up being is that you follow the nanny and how she originally came over from another country and she has her kid of her own, but she never really was attached to that kid. She found her passion in raising other people's children. and she just never found that within her own daughter. Also, you have the mother who she was worked as an attorney. Her husband is very busy as well, and she tried with all of her heart to be the stay-at-home mom, but her passion keeps screaming at her to go back into the law field and to go back and be a lawyer. And so she struggles with it, but she decides to get a nanny just so she can find a piece of that happiness that she lost when she had her children. Later on, she ends up missing the kids more and more, and she wants to be more part of their life. She kind of gets jealous of the nanny because the nanny is always there. The nanny is the first person that witnesses, baby steps, talking, milestones in each of the child's lives. And as a mother, that kind of destroys her. It rips her to shreds. And she wants to be there for her kid. So it's this struggle between nanny and mother over who's going to be there. The nanny keeps pushing the mother out of the way because she wants to be there with the kids, and the mother keeps pushing the nanny out of the way because they're her kids, basically, and she wants to be a part of. And the nanny just kind of keeps embedding herself deeper and deeper into their lives. For example, when she's not taking care of the kids, she has nothing else to do, even though she has her own kid at home. She has nothing, and she becomes very depressed and in this very darkened state where she'll sit in a room, and the room is literally in total darkness until it's time for her to go back to her work. There are times when she'll just stay in their home on the couch doing nothing, completely depressed because they're not there. The kids are not there with them. And so it's this push and pull struggle between the mother and the nanny to the point where it just kind of all erupts on that terrible night with the kids. And it is a beautiful examination of cultural differences, class, race, economics, everything that you want to know about two different worlds and how what happens when they come into conflict with each other, and how the innocence of kids, how that is ultimately destroyed through this act. But in a weird way, they both, the nanny and the mother, love the kids very much so, to the point where they love them to death. So that's not a spoiler because it's. But that was one of the best books that I've ever read. Um, so I highly recommend it. Another book is The Boy at the Keyhole by Stephen Gales. Um, it is basically about this boy who is at an estate. It's a big picture, something like Downton Abbey, that type of big estate property, and he is with his. I guess you would. I wouldn't necessarily call it nanny, maybe governess. I don't. What do you call it in like British terms, Gary?
Wait, what? Repeat it.
What do you call like a governess or a nanny in British terminology?
Babysitter.
Oh, you're like
A
a
nanny
babysitter.
or a nanny. We call it nanny
We call a babysitter a
or
babysitter.
childminder.
A childminder. So this is basically she's like head of the estate, childminder, and she's with this boy. The thing is that her mother, the boy's mother, went off to America so that she can find as much money as she can to help save the family business because her husband just died. It was a freak accident where he fell down a flight of steps and hit his head and he just died. And so she has to travel to America to go get the money in order to help put the estate back together. It's a lot of money to raise and to have an estate. It's not like this in a regular apartment. This is, it takes place in the 70s, by the way. So I thought it was like the old English, but no, it's like the 70s. People have estates. Um, so the boy, he's around 7 years old and he's missing his mother terribly. And he has to deal with his caregiver, nanny, estate holder. I don't know the proper terminology for it. But basically, it's just like a nanny, an overarching nanny who takes care of the house and the boy and the finances or whatever is left of the finances. So the boy is missing his mother terribly, and he doesn't know when she's going to return. And all he has is the letters that his mother is writing to him. And he takes these letters and he puts him out on like a map, an atlas, so he can follow where she is during in her letters, so he feels like he's closer to her. And he starts looking at the letters, and he's very smart. He's looking at the location, and certain things just don't add up. The mother says, for example, she's heading to California, but her next letter is from it takes place in Boston, and geography just doesn't matches up, to the point where he believes that the nanny killed her, killed his mother, because he's not been able to reach her on the phone. All you have is these letters that just seems to be completely out of order and discombobulated and doesn't make any sense. And the nanny itself is not really giving any type of explanation aside from your mother just left in the middle of the night. Who leaves their child without saying goodbye? So he believes that she did her in, and he is determined, even at 7, to find out where his mother is, or at least where the body is, and to get this nanny who he believes killed her. The thing is that it's much deeper than that, and you find out what happens to the mother, and with the boy, and how his mind starts to go more mad and madder because he's not able to see his mother. So he comes up with these theories that he's very determined, and cases that he's determined to solve, and it destroys him, especially when he finds out what exactly happened. It destroys him to the point where he is no longer the boy which he originally was. And the governess nanny woman has to hold on to certain secrets in order to protect him, because she loves him with such a fierceness, way more than you would argue than the mother did. So it's also a struggle with that as well. And I can't reveal a plot twist, but it feels like one of those old fashioned movies where it's like one of those psychological thrillers, like an Alfred Hitchcock, or remember Rebecca the book. So it's one of those type of feelings that you get. It's very, very atmospheric, and you just feel that you're in this boy's shoes, and you feel this story, and you don't know what's going on with the nanny. And the reason why it's called The Boy at the Keyhole is because every morning he looks through his mother's door, which has remained locked because of the nanny, because he's going around searching through all the letters and looking for investigation, to the point where she locks the door, and all he can do is every day is look through the peephole to find out, trying to find out and come up with theories as to what happened to his mother. So it was literally one of the the best books I've read this year, and it was
That
just
that definitely sounds intriguing.
it is right. So yeah, a lot of people were talking about it. I was like, oh, I have to read this book, and then I read it. I was like, oh my gosh, it's the greatest thing I ever read. So that is number that there's no number as to how good it is, but that was the third book I mentioned. And the fourth book is a book that it's about these twins. It's a boy and a girl. They're in high school, and it's called The Girl Made of Stars. And they're twins, Geminis, and it kind of goes back with the astrology, and how how it looks in the stars. So that's why it's called A Girl Made of Stars. And her twin brother is accused of raping her best friend, and how it tears the family and her apart, along as well as with their relationship, because at the end of the day, even though her best friend was raped, that's still her brother. That's someone that they shared the same womb with. So they have a bond that seems to be unbreakable until this act happens. And she has to decide what she's going to do and whose side she's going to be on. And she looks at her brother, who she views as being her hero, and she looks at him with an entirely different perspective. Even though she may not want to believe that he's a rapist, her best friend is saying that he's a rapist. And while you don't necessarily know what happens, whether or not he did it or not, and there's no admission of guilt or anything, but it still tears the family apart, and it tears her apart, and it tears the school apart, because they don't know what side to belong to. It's like you have all the guys who's like, yeah, he didn't do it. She always just puts out, or whatever it is that they say. And then you have the girls who's like, no, she did it. He did it. he's a raper, what are we going to do? And then how she's being treated and looked differently at school, even though she's not the one who accused him, nor was even the one who was assaulted. She is being tormented, and people are picking at her from all different sides, and how she has to deal with that as well. And it's a YA book, but it was one of those books that my heart bled. Like, I felt for her, I felt for the whole family, and I felt even for him, because at the end of the day, he was still fighting off an accusation, and you don't know whether or not it's real. And even he's like, I don't know what happened. So that's what it is. It's about that kind of relationship, and how it is never going to be the same ever again, and how it takes two souls, these two Gemini souls, and rips it apart. So that was just amazing. And lastly, um, one of my other books is a book that you mentioned, which is Caroline Katniss. As we already stated, and I was like,
Yay.
yay! I really went back and forth whether or not I should include this, just for the simple fact that there was like a teeny weeny bit of plot holes. But then I was like, you know what? I love this book because I went insane over this book. The writing is incredible. I I'm right there with Joe, and I feel creeped out by this, and I'm scared at the same time. And you don't know what's going on. You can't predict anything about it. So that is one of the reasons why I had to include this on the list, even though it's not perfect. But it was still one of those books where you read it and you're like, wow, that happened. And then you have to tell someone about it. So I included that. That's my five, in no order at all.
Awesome. So
Yay!
yeah, that's our list right there. So I mean, yeah, I don't want to end the show abruptly. I want to talk about 2019 at least a little bit. So I want to start off by asking, what are your reading goals for 2019? Like, how many books do you want to read? Are you going to vary the genres that you read, and just other things that you plan to do reading wise in 2019?
See, I failed my reading goals for this year. My goal was 52, figure a book a week, but I only ended up doing 33, and I'm very disappointed about that. But at the same time, reading is not a competition. But I will still set the goal at 52. And if I end up with just 32, I'm okay with that. But I will say that my goal is to read fantasy, because it's something that I've not done this year. I don't really recall. There were some sci-fi element books, but there wasn't that was anything fantasy based. And I originally loved fantasy. I loved Hobbit and Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings, and all of those books. So my goal would be to get more into that. I have a book that I've had for I'm a hoarder. So I've had the book for like a year now. I got it Book Expo at the beginning of the year. Um, that releases in January, but I already have it. It's called The Orange Prior Tree, and that seems like a very captivating fantasy that I know it's almost 1,000 pages. And originally I would able easily knock that off in like 3 days, but I'm old now, so we'll see how that goes. But that's like my main two goals, is to still set it at 52, not be upset if I don't make that goal, but to read more fantasy books, try to incorporate them. Like, it's really hard because my thrillers and my suspense books are just something that they keep me alive. So we'll see how that goes.
Those sound like good goals to me. Let me know if you read any good fantasy. Um, my goals. So in 2018, my actual Goodreads goal was to read 20 books. That was because the year prior I read 30 books, but I wasn't enjoying it as much because I felt pressured to read more and more books and faster. And I don't like that feeling because I like to just enjoy books. And I feel like in 2018, I had a really great reading year because I met my goal in like, I don't know, like September, October or something. And then I could just enjoy books. Like I could, I didn't have to actually try to beat my goal. I just read naturally. I didn't force myself to read certain things. Like I just read the books I naturally wanted to read and I enjoyed it, and I feel like I read some great books. So I want to continue that kind of feeling in 2019. So I'm probably going to set my goal to something like 21 or 22 or something like that. Just something I know that is easily achievable, to where I can still, enjoy books. Um, so I'll do that, like 21, 22 or something. And as for the types of books, I do want to read more fantasy also, but also I want to read more sci-fi because I'm actually like writing sci-fi stories as well. And I feel like I need more of an understanding on what other authors have done in the genre. Just so I have that appreciation and that level of grounding in the genre. And yeah, I think that's it really. I do want to read more foreign stuff also because that was one of the things I wanted to do in 2018. I wanted to read more foreign books, but they were mostly like Japanese or South Korean books. But I need to expand to other continents, and stuff like that. So I'll be working on that. And also, I want to finally finish the Mistborn series, which is a fantasy series written by Brandon Sanderson. He's like one of the biggest fantasy authors. He's well known for coming up with the most unique magic systems. So I started the first Mistborn book like in 2017, but it was one of those long books and I never finished it. So I am going to go back to that at some point this year and I am going to force myself to finish it and hopefully finish the whole series because I hear so many good things about the series and I want to know, like, what I want to see what people are seeing in that series. So I'm going to force myself to finish that. And also, I want to visit more bookshops in 2019. One of the things I told myself that I was going to do last year was go to a new bookshop every month, and I didn't do that. I didn't do that at all. It was really good to actually go to New York and do the book shopping with you. And I really like going to bookshops and just browsing and finding new books. So I want to do more of that in 2019. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it for my goals. So, oh yeah, and I guess one more goal would be to, you know, make this podcast more entertaining, more fun, and just more consistent in 2019 as well. So hopefully we can achieve that.
Yay! Good goals.
Indeed. But that's pretty much it from us. I want to wish everyone a happy new year because most people, will be hearing this in 2019. So happy new year to everyone. I hope you had a pleasant and a safe New Year's Eve celebration. And let's enjoy 2019. Any final
Happy New
words,
Year.
Dana?
Yeah, Happy New Year to everyone. We're in the past right now. Still 2018. Woo! Um, yeah. I hope you have a really great reading season and a reading year and you find the books you love and they all don't suck or they're not pride.
Indeed. And one more thing, I want to give a big shout outs to Ramiz Quadri because he actually bought me a Kindle Paperwhite for my birthday. So I have some new tech to read with, which is great. And I'm loving the device so far. So thank you very much for that.
That's cool. I got nothing for my birthday.
Oh man, when is your birthday?
April.
Okay, we'll have to work on something.
We
But
have to work on something.
thanks for listening, everyone.
Cool.
Peace.
Peace.